Alrighty, we'd like to thank everybody for stopping in today. We're very fortunate for our guests today. We have previous mayors of Elida, and they're going to talk about their time with Elida and tell their stories. And thank you so much, guys, for coming in today. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right, so if I can start with Claude, can you tell me your name and then what years you served as mayor, then we'll just go around from there.
Okay, I'm Claude Paxton. I served in 2023.
Kim Hardy, 2020 to 2014, I think it was.
Denny Schwinnen, I was mayor from 1988 to 1991.
Okay. So Denny's what am I looking for? The oldest living mayor, we should say. Served the longest time ago. Yeah, there we go.
Whatever.
Alrighty, so let's start off with what got you guys into politics. Just whoever wants to start that off, and then
Since I'm the oldest former mayor, I guess.
There we
in
go.
terms of years
Yeah.
ago. I moved to Elida in 1975 when I got married. I was teaching at the Elida High School, and Don and Phyllis Lease said, "Hey, there's an opening on council. How about applying for it?" I did. I got it, and so from 1980, I think I got on council, and then shortly after, I ended up being council president. And so in 1988, the current mayor, Paul Schofield, had just been elected, and about 6 months, and he called me at school and said, "Can you come to my office?" So I did, and he said, "It's time for a change. I'm resigning as mayor." I said, "What does that mean to me?" He said, "You're council president. You are now the acting mayor." So that's how it started, and then because it was it's a 4-year term, and since you had to run for re-election for the unexpired term, I had to run 2 years later, and then I finished out the term then in 1991. But I was on council for like 10 years.
All right, Kim or Claude, what about either of you guys?
Daryl Nichols, matter of fact, the current mayor. I moved to Elida in 1991. I don't know how I knew Daryl at that time. But anyway, he suggested I ought to come to a council meeting and I might be interested in working on council or doing something with the village. And did, and eventually ended up on council. Ended up being mayor temporary for a couple of times, short terms, back when Willett resigned, and then Daryl Nichols was the mayor for a short time, and then he stopped 6 months before that ended, and so I was mayor for 6 months at that time. Very short time after Denny Schwick left, and then Ron Kloppenstein took that position, and then eventually Ron Kloppenstein passed away. There was 2 years remaining in his term, so I got the 2 years because I was council president, and then ran for election and won the election and ran had 4 more years.
Okay, what about you, Claude?
I succeeded Kim, and I ran for election and ran then. So I served 4 years after that. And then Daryl Nichols ran for election, and Daryl Nichols was actually a near neighbor mate when we were kids.
Oh, that's interesting, yeah.
We lived one house apart from each other on High Street, East High Street, 600 block East High Street in Lima.
Huh.
And so we discovered that we were sitting together in a council meeting.
Yeah. So what got you into the mayor position?
I was always interested in government proceedings and was involved, and I thought I'd like to try that position as being help, and so I ran after a position. I was elected.
Gotcha. Okay. So kind of curious too, but when you're running for, well, I shouldn't say running, when you're made interim mayor while they're waiting for somebody else to fill that position, you're not elected to that, right?
No, usually council president steps up into that position.
Okay, so you were council president.
Right, you step up into that position, and they're again, depending on what the situation is, how it works out. My total term was from when I started until I left being mayor was 24 years, so I was involved in the village for 24 years.
Okay.
The village charter says in the absence of the mayor, council president takes over, and so if the mayor was on vacation, council president ran the meetings because he had, two meetings a month.
Yeah.
Second and the fourth Tuesday. I think it's still that way.
Still is that way.
So,
I understand yesterday when we were here too, Denny, you told me an interesting story on why you had to resign too.
well, we lived on 114 Roger Street. My wife and I got married in '75, and so then all of a sudden the house on Roger Street became pretty small with 3 kids. And so we found a house out in Laurel Oaks, which was about a block and a half outside the village limits. So you can't be mayor of a town if you don't live in the town. And so that's how he ended up, and then again, Terry Myers was council president, and so he took over as interim president, or mayor, when I was there, so.
Yeah, and now I think Laura Oaks is part of the village, isn't it?
Part of it is, and part of it isn't. And
Okay.
like I said, I'm about a block and a half outside the village limits.
Okay, I got
On
you.
Whippoorwill.
Yeah, that's cool. It's really cool. So, what notable happens, like during each of your guys' individual turn? Anything that sticks out, maybe, that might have happened within the village?
The biggest thing, when I was on council and mayor, was the purchase of Lima water. It was very controversial.
Huh.
Elida had 3 old wells right by the railroad tracks, and it was very full of sulfur. Matter of fact, James' dad was the water.
Okay.
And there was 3 wells, and the village was growing, and those 3 wells would not keep up with the supply we needed. And you could almost drive by those wells and smell the sulfur. And so it was time to do something, whether we wanted to build a reservoir, whatever. And it was controversial because the people in the village felt that the city of Lima would take advantage of us and keep raising the rates and so on. But all in all, I think that was the biggest accomplishment, was to get city water inside the village lines and so on, rather than our 3 old sulfur wells that supply the village. So that was the biggest accomplishment that I can remember.
I'm sure city water probably wasn't cheap either.
Well, again, it was cheaper than building a reservoir.
That's true, yeah.
And, or getting it from Delphus. I mean, we had all kind of ideas about where we could get water. So, but it worked out.
Yeah. What about you, Ken?
Geez, you go back all the time. It's probably some of the hottest topics that we ended up doing. At one point in time, the village had different refuse carriers. In other words, we weren't as a unit, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And it came up, as a matter of fact, when Darrell Nichols was mayor back then, it came up and we were going to have a 1 refuse for the village. Hot topic, really hot topic. A lot of people didn't want it, even though economically for the individuals it was better.
Yeah.
It was cleaner. You didn't have trash out on the streets every day. It was like 1 day a week and then they were picked up. So that was a really hot topic. Eventually, Ron Kloppenstein had a survey done on the village. He was big into water and sewer, and found out that our sewer plant was going to need work eventually. And so later on, when I became mayor, we enacted that with getting the sewer plant updated at the time to meet the EPA standards. And luckily, with his survey, it prompted us to be able to do that and get it done in advance. So therefore, we were able to save a ton of money by having it done prior to being mandated to do it. The other thing on the butcher block was the town hall. It was deteriorating and it had been a subject for, 10 years probably. Bounded back and forth between mayors, and then it was in my lap. And so we eventually got the new town hall.
Now, the old town hall that's on Main Street, right?
Town hall's right across the street.
Okay, yep, that one. Okay, got it.
Yeah, right across from the, we got, and there again, it was deteriorating and it didn't fit the needs anymore. So we got that done. Probably the biggest thing from my part, prior to that, we had a really good village administrator, and then we couldn't find one.
Yeah.
We went through several different gentlemen, and so it kind of fell in my lap to find a VA, a working VA, one that worked out plus worked in the office.
Okay.
Because everybody didn't want somebody to just sat at his desk all day. We needed another person. So anyway, Dave Mesker's name eventually came up after all these interviews, and he was a working VA. He had a history. He had knowledge.
Yeah.
And so I guess the biggest thing that I liked out of what I built was we had a VA The clerk eventually left. We got a new clerk. We had Chris Moss in utilities. It just seemed like everything was falling into place as far as having a really good, solid team.
Yeah.
I mean, one that was complete, you know, with a good VA, which is a backing for the whole village. I mean, he's the one that kind of looks over everything and has the background. And it just kind of all fell together. And so, yeah, I mean, he initiated getting the funds back into where we put money into funds for repurchasing equipment and or vehicles. We ended up with a vac truck to do the sewer lines. We ended up with a camera truck to do sewer lines. We just we kind of caught up a lot of things that had been neglected because we didn't have anybody solid enough to put it in action.
Yeah.
So when the team got together, it all kind of fell into place and things happened, which was a good thing. The village needed it.
Yeah, that was a big improvement, because when I was on council and mayor, we had no village administrator. So the mayor was kind of in charge, but I had a full-time job at school.
Yeah.
So I'd get calls at school and say, hey, the old Ford tractor needs a battery, can we get one? Because there was a limit of what they could spend without approval. So the village administrator, that's an accomplishment for Kim's administration, to get one and to run, be a working, get down in the hole if you have to, and be at the desk if you have to too. So that was a big accomplishment. We needed one back then, but we didn't have it.
Plus the background and there again, when we deal with this, with the sanitary sewer, anything for that matter, any place that he knew where to go to possibly get grants and or money for all these projects. And that was a big asset. It really was. It was huge to know somebody that could go out and find money that would help us.
And used to be a hotel.
All right, Claude, what about you?
Well, mine time's much milder than theirs. They pretty much had things done. Kim left me with a well-run system when I took over and everything. And most everything went pretty well.
Yeah.
Actually, I started out working for the village as a meter reader, water meter reader, and all that entailed. And so I was 8 years doing that, and then they went to an automatic system for reading the meters.
Yeah.
And Kim was still mayor at that time, I believe, and that went well. But I was interested in government. I was always politically oriented. My father, mother were both that way, and so I was interested in the governmental affairs. And I always learned to pay attention. Learned that from childhood, and so I paid attention to things and wanted to be involved in it. And I thought it was time to go ahead and take a shot at being mayor. And it worked out well. The employees were good employees. I had very little problems with employees. When you get some new employees, things were a little different. And adjustment on there. Some of them left, some of them stayed and enjoyed it. There's some new employees. Now I've had to meet some employees on the road since I left being a mayor that I haven't met. And but things have not gone well. The village is in good shape with the mayor we have now. I think Daryl Nichols is much better mayor than I could be. I knew he was better suited for it with his experience and his overall ability, his aptitude for it. So that's about what I'd have to say about that. I'm just glad Daryl's in there doing the good job he's doing.
So did you take over as mayor? Were you elected as mayor before or after the pandemic started in 2020?
After.
After? Okay. Okay. So were you in when the...
No, it was
you weren't?
just before me,
It was the pandemic started after I was
elected.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was elected. After my term was over.
Oh, okay. I gotcha. Okay. I'm pretty sure probably another hot topic. All you guys worked for the village too, so another hot topic was probably when they were taking the old high school down, wasn't it? I bet throughout the village, or not really? No.
No.
Huh.
It wasn't another hot topic, and Kim was there during that time.
The topic of building a new high school took a long period of time. Took a lot of attorneys, a lot of conversation on where and how, and who was going to take care of what. But taking the old one down was not a big issue. Or
the new one was though. I got it. Yeah.
The land where the new high school was built was not inside the village, so in order to get water and sewer and roads, they had to annex that area for the new high school. And so now I think all the buildings, with maybe the exception of the administration, is inside the village.
In the village.
The new elementary is inside, that was outside the village at that time.
Huh.
Now the new one is in, again, they annexed, and then that went, instead of just driveways, we had streets with curbs and so on. And Mr. Kloppenstein and our superintendent worked together to, make sure, and then obviously the income tax for the employees, that was a little sore subject, I guess, for people who didn't have to, at the old high school, we had to pay income tax, but the other teachers, middle school and elementary, did not have to pay income tax. And so when they annexed the 15 or 16 acres, they said, okay, you're inside the village now, you have the employees have to pay the income tax, and it's got to be the largest employer inside the village. So that was a boom for the village.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I know we were talking about the old town hall. Did that have what kind of issues did that building have to it?
Well, first, it was not handicap accessible.
Right. Yeah.
The council chambers and mayor's office was on the 3rd floor.
Oh, wow.
So was the police department. So yes, we didn't meet any kind of handicap accessible.
Yeah.
So that was a big problem. Even when way back in '88 when I became mayor, which
And they shifted to where the offices and the chambers and stuff were down on the ground floor, but it was just deteriorating. It's an old building, roof was in disrepair, which isn't a big deal, but it's not a concrete basement, it's stone.
Oh, it has a basement. I didn't know it had a basement to it. Okay.
Yeah, it's a cellar basically.
Yeah.
And over the years, the floors, it was nothing for the floor to gap 1.5 inches on the side wall, and the floor would drop down. It was just starting to go. And so there again, the people that worked in that atmosphere every day were the ones that kind of instituted thinking about it.
Yeah.
And eventually, like I say, over a period of probably 4 or 5, 6 years, it came to pass.
On the lower floor, at one time, at least when I was mayor, Doc Epstein's office was there, and then the library was right next to it. So, and then the doorway to the west was where you went up to council chambers and mayor's office and police department.
Yeah.
So, and then after Doc Epstein retired, I think there was a dance studio in there for a while and so on. So it was time to get.
Wasn't there a basketball court upstairs?
Well,
At one time?
it was before my time.
Yeah.
Yes, and
Basketball court.
and there was ladies basketball, women's basketball was up on the 3rd floor.
Yep.
And you couldn't shoot very high because the ceiling wasn't very high.
Yeah.
And so I've heard that story that there was a basketball court on the 3rd floor. Of the
You never saw like lines on the floor or anything?
No.
No? Okay, that's interesting. Because I heard that before they built the old gym on the former high school, they would go down there and play basketball down there. The school kids would or something. Yeah. That's interesting though. Would that basement ever flood or not? Like when it rained?
It didn't really have water problems.
Okay.
It was always damp. It was always had water in it.
Yeah.
But it was just old school cellar. I mean, it was just flagstone that was piled up on the sidewall.
Interesting.
Yeah. And it's just a cellar. It's just enough. There's a space in the bottom wide enough to walk through to get to whatever you have to get to. So.
Yeah. So the new town hall was built while you were in office.
Right.
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 So you were the first one to be in there your entire term, then, right, Claude?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because Kim was still mayor in the old building.
Yeah.
I
So
was the first one to be in the entire term. And of course, Daryl is now there, but yeah.
what'd you think of the new building?
I think it's great. And it's
Great?
It just, it just serves well. We've got nice space to do
Yeah.
to lay out, have math to lay out, and got a nice wall place where we could put the math on, a big math, have a pull down on that. So got an area where people can sit in there and have their lunch too, and an area to congregate, have meetings. So there's of course there's a village council meeting on the other side, but it's efficiently built.
Yeah.
And of course we have office for the treasurer in there, and office space for the workers, the secretaries,
Yeah.
those people out there.
And there's room for the police department, and then also just the technological aspect, the LED
That the
screens and stuff.
old town hall couldn't offer. Yeah.
The old office did not have a good place for the police department. It was very limited.
above the police department garage, the Elida Lions Club, when they were in existence, that's where,
I didn't know
they
about
would
this.
meet. The Elida Lions Club met
Yeah.
above the police garage. So there was a lot of things in that old building. Like I said, Doc Epstein's office, the Lima Public Library branch was there. And then, like I said, the Lions Club met upstairs above the garage.
So the new town hall has a basement, and it's a very nice basement. And there again,
it's not like a cellar.
It's not a cellar. It's a nice basement, and it has shelving on it now. All the old records that were up above, and you know, everything is down there and well protected. So they have more than enough room to store and or save things, and a good atmosphere.
Good place for to store important documents, and particularly, as Jim said, the older documents that need to be kept, not allowed to destroy.
Yeah, that's cool. That's really cool. So, do you guys have any other stories that stand out for your guys' times you guys served as mayor?
Well, in 1988, when I was put in as mayor, I was only 39 years old, and the old timers in Elida said, "Well, you're the youngest mayor ever for Elida." I don't know if that's true. I have no way to prove it, but I was the ripe old age of 39, and all of a sudden I'm mayor, and but it worked out. It worked out. I had an excellent council. I had guys, you know, I was one of them, and all of a sudden I'm mayor, and so they said, "Don't worry about it. We'll get you through this." Because I was a little apprehensive. I'd never done anything like that. I was okay with being council president and filling in once in a while, but I had an excellent, and a couple of them became mayor. Denny Swick and Terry Myers. Terry took over for me, so Artie Brickner. It was a good council, and they helped me. You know, they said, "We'll get you through this." And then Don Lease was they call them fiscal officers now. They call them clerk treasurers back then. And he was my neighbor and worked with me at school. And he said, "I'm right side of you. Don't worry about it. You know, running the meeting and so on." So that worked out. They helped me.
Yeah. Kim or Claude, do you guys have anything?
No, it's just being associated with the village for 24 years. It just seems like even in times where things weren't working well, and or you'd lose important people like a village administrator, and then you had, you know, all these things happen. It seemed like all the employees of the village council, whoever mayor at the time, always worked together to keep it together as good as possible, and then build that structure from there, and replace whatever was missing, and or look to the future and work toward that future. So even in rough times, it seems like everybody always held their own, had the best interest of the village at heart, and worked toward that goal, and it eventually happens. You know, but everybody always works really hard together.
Yeah, that's cool.
I was talking to the gentleman before we start taping. One of the things that back in 1988, we had a mayor's court that met twice a month. If the policeman picked up somebody for speeding, they'd have to come to mayor's court. And I'm not a lawyer, obviously, but they said, "No, you're the mayor and you can have mayor's court." The other thing I found out, the mayor can marry people. And so being in school, a lot of kids, I call them, knew me. And so a lot of times it was a second marriage or whatever. So the day after I got, you know, sworn into office, a girl called me and she said, "Mr. Schwinnen?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Will you marry me?" And I said, "I don't know. What do you look like?" As a joke. And then she said, "Oh, no. I mean, will you marry my boyfriend?" And so I said, "I don't know if I can do that." So I called Walt Lawson, our solicitor at the time. He said, "Sure, you can. There's a book in the back of the file cabinet, blow the dust off of it, and it's got forms. And then you got to, you know, fill out the marriage license and send it to one of the courts, the probate court, I think." But I was asking these gentlemen if they, you know, had mayor's court or married people. I had both back in '88, and I think I married about 5 couples, all told. And you know, that's something I didn't know I could do until they told me. They said, "Yeah, you got mayor's court every other Monday, and then village council meetings every other Tuesday." So it kept you busy.
So I'm kind of curious, did either of you two marry anybody or not?
I had a couple of requests initially. I opted not to do that. And at that time, he was talking about mayor's court. There again, that was a possibility, but that's where the system and council and everybody at the time decided it would be better interest to have an attorney come in and run mayor's court. And so we switched the system from mayor being mayor's court to an attorney running the mayor's court.
And Kim left the marriage equipment for me in there. And I never did that either. Never did a request. But I wasn't going to do that either.
Yeah.
That's still in the desk as far as I know.
Yeah.
Carol has that right there. But no, personally, I don't want to do that. And I want them to get better counsel than do it, because you know, from a Christian point of view, you need to have some good counsel to
Yeah.
do that, to, you know, have a godly marriage, and not to go, situation like that is generally something where it's fly by night type of thing, too quick. The man needs to know what he's getting into, needs to have a proper relationship, particularly with God, so it's a godly marriage.
Yeah.
So an interesting story, and I don't know if I did it right or not, but a young man, 19 years old, got picked up for speeding in Elida. So he knew he was going to pay the fine, so he came with some money, and he pleaded no contest, which if they pleaded not guilty, then we shipped it to Lima court. We didn't deal with lawyers or all hearings and all that. But I felt sorry for the young man. I told him what his fine was, and I told him what court costs were, because that's, you know, part of it. And he started digging, and I took the change out of his pocket. I mean, he left with nothing. And I said, and he came up like $2 short. I said, close enough. And they said, well, you're not allowed to do that. I said, well, I did it. I felt sorry for the young man. Like I said, I took the change out of his pocket, and I still kind of laugh about that. But you know, that's what you get into in a small town. It's like, okay, you paid your fine. There is court costs. He didn't figure on that, but he had no money left when he left the office, left mayor's court.
Was he a student of yours too? Or not?
No, he was not. No, he was not. But he was picked up in the Elida by our policeman, our police force.
Okay, yeah.
And that's the only ones we dealt with, was anything that happened in the village.
Yeah. So how many different mayor's court sections did you have during your term?
Well, we held it every month, and depending how many people they picked up for whatever, you know, traffic violations usually. And most of them pleaded no contest. But mayor's court was every other Monday of the month, so twice a month, and I was there for 4 years.
So you got to stand up there?
Well, they came in the office, and they basically, you know, I'd ask them how they plead, and if they pleaded no contest, I'd say, okay, here's the fine, and here's the court costs, and then I turn that over to the clerk treasurer.
Another important factor that happened over the years, the council, all 24 years I was on council, and I think still today, is an extremely conservative council. They think a lot about the residents of the village and not burdening them. That's a good thing. The bottom line is the village has to have money to run. So Ron Kloppenstein, in his infinite wisdom, which made him real popular for a short period of time, came up with the income tax, and that's when that was a long duration thing. Working on that, talking about it, instituting it. But the village would not be here today if the income tax hadn't been instituted at that time. You have to have a certain amount of money to run the village.
Yeah.
You know, it's a non-profit, but you still got to cover the bills, and they face the same problems that we do in everyday lives. Every year, everything goes up, so you still have to have that money coming in. But yeah, Ron Kloppenstein initiated the initial income tax, and it's still in place, and it still works for the village.
Yeah.
Another way the village gets money, when we bought Lima water, the village bought it from Lima, and then people who were in American Township who were not inside the village had to pay a 10% surcharge. You know, and so where I currently live, I pay 10% more than the village residents because Lima sold it to Elida, Elida sold it to people in American Township. Well, what's nice about that is, you know, I think these guys know too, if you collect money for water, it's got to go to water. If you collect money for sewer, it's got to go to the sewer. You can't buy a police car with water and sewer money. But the 10% surcharge, the money they collected extra from the American Township, people who wanted water and sewer, that could be used to buy pickup trucks, dump trucks, snow plows, all that. So that helped a lot because the surcharge was not designated water or sewer. So that helped. We make some money for the village.
Yeah. That's cool.
But there again, that instituted the fact that when we did the income tax, I not only paid village tax, but I paid Lima's 1.5% income tax also. So,
So did I.
And they got a discount. They give you 25% off of their Lima rate if you had to pay someplace else. But and my wife was in the same spot. She paid 2 income taxes, which made her real happy also.
So, what's the role of the village council? I'm kind of curious on that now too. And how does the village council work together with the mayor? How does that work?
Well, the village council is responsible for any actions taken by the government along with the mayor, we work together. For instance, you got to pass an ordinance on there. Council has to go through that. The council can decide what any ordinances to be passed, like what you do on streets or anything. And if the majority council comes together to make an agreement, then that ordinance passes. If they come together tied, it can be cases where the mayor can cast a vote. There's a disagreement. The mayor can make the final vote, but generally speaking, the council will do that. And we've had votes both ways, and the mayor makes a decision, but generally speaking, council comes to an agreement. But whenever any issue comes up, council has to debate it. Sometimes it takes three votes.
3 readings, yeah.
3 readings and do it. Sometimes they'll go through more quickly. There's something called an emergency legislation, where they want to get it done right away, and it takes special readings to do that, and they'll go through it in one reading, and one day, and pass the legislation. That's something that's particularly urgent that needs to be done for that. But those are not usual.
Yeah.
The majority of things in the government village, anything that the mayor can't say, I'm gonna do this, or I'm gonna spend this. The council is responsible for making all the ordinances that the mayor lives by.
Okay, got it.
You can't do anything, as mayor, you can't do anything on your own. You have to live by the guidelines that council sets up. And that's why the mayor may bring stuff to the council, or council might bring things in, and they work through it, vote on it, whether it's a good idea, not a good idea, and then it becomes an ordinance, and then you can live by that ordinance.
Okay.
So they run, basically the council runs the village in the sense that anything that is done in the village has to go through council, and then the mayor and everybody can work by that.
And then the councilmen get elected too, don't they?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. How long is their term usually?
4 years.
4-year term.
Is it the same with mayor too?
Yes.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah. Now the council has alternating dates. In other words, 4 will be up and then 2 will be up. So it's not all 6
Yeah, you won't have
getting done at
complete
once.
turnover, yeah.
Okay. So there's elections every 2 years for council. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there any limit that you can serve as mayor, like term wise, or not?
There's no term
No.
limit.
No,
There's not?
There's no limit. One example about those ordinances is past that we had somebody, and it's happened more than this, but someone wanted to put a stop sign up in an alley, and it was a busy alley.
Mm-hmm.
And that's far as his concern anyway, and so it was debate about whether to put a stop sign on that at that intersection, and two alleys going together.
Yeah.
And so it was debate about that, and eventually council agreed to put the stop sign up. Some of us thought it really wasn't important, didn't need to be there, but majority council said, yeah, we're gonna put it up. So it's there, but, we were kind of in a disagreement about it, but it went
Worked
through.
out.
But we'll have to listen to the people, what they want, and decide what's best for the village. You got that going on where, is this really the right thing to do? The best thing to do? And I know Kim and I we considered that ourselves. We've had different views on that as far as some of the council, but sometimes they're more important things, and the council has to go through it carefully. And sometimes it takes some reading and discovery to decide.
I think the main problem is you're not going to make everybody happy.
No.
Yeah.
And you run across a lot of different things. One thing sticks out in my mind, and to say people don't agree and or think alike is extremely correct. We had a lady that came into council, and she was extremely unhappy with her neighbor for the color they painted their house. Okay, fine. We have no jurisdiction over that. Technically. Okay. And she had asked council. She wanted council to give themselves the authority to dictate what color you could paint your homes in the village. And I just looked at her and I said, do you really want to give us that kind of power? I said, personally, I love purple. And do you want to give that power to me? And so it was kind of and not that I wasn't trying to make fun of her, but she needed to stop and think. You don't want to give an entity, your neighbor's your neighbor, and if it's painted, it's gonna be in good shape and it's painted well. What color? Yeah. But you just have to contend with things like that. You have to kind of reason through it and saying, you know, everybody pays to live here. Everybody has their own piece of their rock.
Yeah.
You know, and she understood eventually, but she wanted to give council that kind of power. And it's like, no, council doesn't need that kind of power at all.
One of the issues that I faced, and I'm sure Kim didn't probably that day, but was income taxes at the end of the year when they would get their tax bill and think that they should have to pay that much, is to investigate what the situation was and find out, did they get overcharged, was there a mistake or whatever, and decide whether this person didn't need to pay any more, whether they need to pay the whole. And I had several cases where I said, no, you don't really need to pay. There's a system to it, but the people should not have to pay as much as they were being charged. They already paid all that they needed to pay, and I'd go through the process of relieving them of that. And there were a couple that were really way out there stretching, and I say, you know, you gotta go ahead and pay this extra. And so that was one of the harder duties when you have to tell somebody you need to pay that tax. And as a matter of fact, I consulted Kim about it when I first was doing that, because there were some people who wanted to slack off and let's not pay all their taxes. But there were some people who were situations that were reasonable, and I would relieve them. But you know, those are minor situations. You know, you don't want to let things go that you shouldn't. At the same time, you want to be honest and fair with them. No, I don't know. Kim ever had any of those where they?
Oh yeah. Yeah, you had to take into consideration everything going on in their lives, and or there sometimes were mistakes made between their company and the income tax people and the village. And so you had to take everything in, and every once, it was rare, but every once in a while you had to just say no.
Yeah.
You know, we'll take it off the books because, you know, a lot of, I had a couple of ones that had paid, but they weren't indicated anywhere they had paid it. So it took us a while, but we found it and relieved them of it, got them off the hook.
A couple of times I had them come into the office to explain something that they weren't clear, and so one time didn't help them, another time did. So you know, but,
yeah.
But it's being careful, as Kim said, being compassionate, and doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Sitting here reminiscing about council meetings and whatnot, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Jane Baskey's dad, Everett Steeman. He was our water and sewer guy. And on council, you know, when you flush, you don't care where it goes, okay? We don't understand what, you know, but then, you know, he'd come to us and say, I need this, I need this, I need this. So one council meeting, we actually went out to the sewer plant, had our meeting out there, and Everett told us, here's why we need the money, and showed us what happens to the stuff when you flush. And we had no idea. I mean, who would, you know? So, and then, you know, it ends up in the river eventually after it's purified. But that was an interesting council meeting. And again, he, you know, we didn't know, and so he educated us on why we needed the money for the sewer plant and so on. So that was one of my more interesting council meetings. And like I said, Everett did a great job for us. So he worked for the village for many, many years.
And when I first became mayor is when we did the first improvement, and they're doing another huge improvement out of the sanitary sewer, which ought to take the village for years then. It ought to keep the EP happy for a while, if you can make the EPA happy.
EPA was always in our back pocket. I mean, way back when, it's like, oh, you gotta do this, this, and this. And, you know, depending on the administration in Washington, whether or not EPA had all that power, but they were always in our back pocket and saying, oh, you get one project done, oh, you got to do this now for this, you know. So I know what these gentlemen went through with that. We were going through it way back in '88 to '91.
Yeah, it's still ongoing.
Yeah.
It was supposed to be done in 2025, but then there've been some delays on not the village's part, but you know, so it's going on.
And there again, the water tower came to pass.
Yeah, that was huge.
Yeah, and that's a great reservoir, not only for fire protection, but just to have water.
Yeah.
And up with that, eventually, they took care of the trihalomethane, or they have filters now that are much greater improved to keep the water to a certain level that has to be met. And then the old water tower came down.
Yeah.
So that's a big asset for the village too. Matter of fact, I think they're to the point now where if push comes to shove, they could run right off the pressure out of Lima rather than the tower is basically for the pressure. But in an emergency situation, I think they can just literally close the tower off and run from the Lime if they had to for a short period.
That is true, but the pressure isn't as strong. You know, Dave and I were talking about that not too long ago, but when I was still mayor, but anyway, it can be run, but it's going to be reduced pressure, and so I mean, like, you have trouble taking showers and stuff like that. There's just so much you can do. But we've been fortunate that we've not lost that ability yet. We had the power, the shower, the water tower's working, and it's been doing good. And like Kim said, that new water tower made a huge difference.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask too, Kim, what color did that lady's neighbor paint her house? I'm kind of curious.
I have no
you don't
idea.
remember?
I don't know if she ever stated colors. I don't know. She just didn't like it.
Did the village ever get any purple houses after that, or not?
No. We didn't even go there putting that in legislation. Whereas the village has the right that you can only paint your house this color. You know, it was insane. Sometimes people, I just don't think it out too far.
Yeah.
You know, you don't. And council doesn't. I think most people that are on council, you know, I think technically feel that you know, the council doesn't need too much power. It needs the powers instilled to make the village run and everything run smoothly. You don't need to be overwhelmed with all this power. You know, the village, you know, you deal with the subjects that come up at the time. You know, you don't need to dictate everything. As a matter of fact, stay away from it. It works out better usually.
Danny, I'm sure you could think of it. Do you have any stories like that happened when you were either on council or mayor?
We very rarely had anybody come to council as an audience. I mean, we you know, not a lot of, I mean, maybe they couldn't come up the steps, I don't know. But we very rarely had any visitors come to our council meetings. So, one big event that I remember was the burning of Maria's. The fire in Maria's was huge. It was a truck stop, you know, before that, and then Maria's restaurant. And that was a huge fire, and I lived on Roger Street, which is right, you know, north of that. And I remember it. That was you know, you could see the flames from my house on Roger Street. It was a big, terrible fire.
So where was Maria's at?
Maria's, well, the old truck stop, and then Maria's is where Nidert's mowers are.
Now? Okay.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, when I came to Elida, that was a truck stop.
Huh.
So.
Elida had a truck stop. Who would have thought?
They had showers and food and fuel, of course. So that's been a few years ago. And then it was turned into a restaurant by, I think, Bill DeAndre was the owner. And one night it caught fire, and it was huge. It destroyed it.
Did that happen when you were mayor or on council?
I think I was mayor at that
You were
time,
mayor at that time, okay.
Because I walked down just to see if, you know, if they needed anything in terms of, you know, water turned off or on, or electricity on or off, that kind of thing.
Interesting.
Maria's was a good restaurant.
Was it?
Yeah, we used to, church group of us from church would go there on Sunday afternoons.
Yeah.
It was nice.
Yeah. I don't know. Can you guys think of any other stories that might stick out? No?
That's about it.
Not myself. Like I say, probably the hottest topic, or the angriest crowds that we ran into in all my 24 years was the garbage. Getting refuse for the whole village. That just irritated a lot of people.
Yeah.
And that was talked about even back in '88, you know, because it's like everybody liked their garbage guy. They're independent, so they didn't want to do business with somebody else, you know. But even if it was cheaper, they said, well, I know Joe, my garbage guy, I want him. So it was even talked about back in '88 about getting one garbage, one day, and all that. So.
Yeah.
And it worked. I mean, economically, it's a huge savings for the residents. And there's trash out one day a week versus every day of the week, because the independent haulers had different days that they picked up. So you always had trash on the curb. So it cleaned it up and really made it more economical. It just took a while for everybody to get adjusted to it.
Yeah.
I live in American Township now, and we have Monday is one, Tuesday is one, and then the Rumpke is the main one, but that's Wednesday. So the only day we don't have garbage out is Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So, and that's the exact reason you want to go with one hauler, and
Yeah.
they make it cheaper, and they recycle, that kind of thing. So that was a good move for the village, I think, even though I wasn't involved in it.
I wanted to ask too, what was the council meeting inside of the sanitary water treatment facility like? What was the tour like too, I should say?
Well, we learned a lot. I mean, that's the thing. We learned why the sewer department needed money. We had no idea, and it, and Everett was good about showing us the tour of it. And I'd never been in a sewer plant, but it was very educational. But it was a normal council meeting, and then afterwards we did the tour, so it worked out. And that, again, you got to get educated on a lot of things.
Yeah.
And that was one of them. I had no idea. Even the water, when we went with Lima Water, it was like, we have to have a tower and pumps and 3 huge pumps, and that was all part of it. But yeah, when I moved to Elida, they had 3 old wells and all sulfur right there where the railroad tracks, right there where the current water tower is now. So they had and Elida was growing and it couldn't keep up.
Yeah.
I mean, we had a lot of times we'd say, don't wash your cars, don't spray your driveway down, all those kind of things, because there just wasn't enough water with those 3 old wells.
I'm sure all 3 of you guys probably learned a lot through your time as mayor, though, comparative to.
There's nothing like a walk through the sewer plant. It'll clear your sinuses for sure.
Yeah, we've all experienced that.
I mean, it's a science. What comes in has to, and by the time it goes out, it has to meet specs. And it's
a process.
Yeah, it's a process.
My first job for the village was mowing the lawns. Elida was included out the sewer plant, and also I read the water meters.
Yeah.
And so when I was out the sewer plant, I got a whiff of it. It was good. The only other thing that stands out to my mind was there were 2 particulars that didn't like to pay their income taxes. One of them on the east side of town there, a place you particularly know, I think, there. Off of, I guess they named the road, but anyway, every year I'd have to fight with him. He'd always come back with something, but no, I got this and I got that.
Yeah.
And then there was another similar thing like that. But that went on every year I was mayor.
Yeah.
But you always got to pay. And he did. He paid.
Yeah.
I guess if I have anything last to say is that the people have always had confidence in council, and they have to realize that council has the best interest of the village, and they work really hard as a unit, along with the mayor and or village administrator, clerk, whatever. Everybody has to work as a team, and everybody has to kind of have an insight for the future. And they eventually work toward that.
Yeah.
And so all the years that I was involved with the village and the 6-7 years afterwards, I'm strictly very confident in the fact that we're all going to be real well taken care of. So I don't want to become part of Lima. That's all I know.
Yeah. All I said, I remember being on council, and council always came together and make a decision, and that was settled. It was settled when we left the discussion.
Well, I guess in closing, I'm going to ask you guys one more question. What advice do you guys have for people who might want to get into politics?
Well, if you have an interest, first of all, you have to have an interest. A lot of times people run for office because they have an axe to grind. And whether it's school board or council or city. And then once that axe is ground, they're not a very good council member. So you got to go into it without any complaint. I'm going to get on council and show them. You got to go in and for the benefit of the people. You got to say, I want to do something for the village. I want to do my civic duty. I think I can contribute. But don't run for office if you've got an axe to grind, because once it's ground, you're not a very good council person.
Yeah. Kim or Claude, do you guys have anything?
Oh yeah, I think the right individual that wants to see the village grow and be better for the residents and continue to grow with the residents. You just have to understand you're one of 6 people on council. So in other words, you may think 100%, 2,000% that what you believe and want to have happen is right. You have to have the other 5 people agree with that. So you learn to work with other people. You learn to express your point. But it's a good position. It really is, and you do serve a purpose, and you do see results. I mean, anything you do over time you can actually see where it's made the village better, and that's a good feeling.
The other one is take your time, read legislation, understand the legislation when it's coming up. Not always is legislation, there's other things. Read, understand, listen so that you know for sure, and listen to the councilmen, but listen to people well to what they're trying to promote, and get understanding. Understanding is key to making the right decision, making sure you understand correctly.
Yeah.
You know, one thing through the years, the state of Ohio audits the books.
Yeah.
And it costs us money, but Elida's always come out perfect. I mean, just, you might have a, violation here or there, but it was just a paper error. And so at least the years I was there, the state auditors would come in, they'd spend 2 weeks, upstairs.
Yeah.
And, but we always took care of the village's money the right way.
And there's always checks and balances, no matter what it is. That the whole system is based on checks and balances. So the system isn't weak someplace and somebody can take advantage of it. There's always a check and a balance, especially when it comes to the money.
Alrighty, guys. Well, I want to thank you guys for coming, and thank you guys for
having us.
allowing to be part of this interview.
Yep.
And
Appreciate it.
yeah, thanks, guys. All right, thanks for tuning in and watching, guys. It's Jace McDonald signing out.